Apparently someone in London is stabbed every 58 seconds. Poor bastard. I don't care what anyone says, Amy Schumer is extremely talented. I mean, who else can steal jokes from others, and still remain remarkably unfunny? A boy decides goes fishing at his local river. But after a tiresome and frustrating hour, he has gained no sight of any fish. The boy continues until he has ran out of bait, and in a grump decides to pack up and cycle home. Just before he does so, however, he spots a curious old fisherman across the other side of the river, puffing at his pipe on a little stool. The young boy squints his eyes, and notices that every time the old man launches his rod into the river, he is catching heaps of fish. Amazed, the young boy rails around to the other side of the river, where, baffled, he asks the old man what his trick is. "What is my trick, you say?" The old man mumbles. "Well, listen up carefully. You must grip onto your penis firmly, and toss it to the left. As you do this, you must mirror the motion with your fishing rod and aim the rod to your left. You must then repeat this act on your right side. If you keep switching between your left and right side, before you know it you will have caught every last fish in the river." Bewildered yet determined, the young boy retraces his steps around the river. Carefully he begins to follow the fisherman's command, and to his delight the old man's trick works. Fish are bouncing onto his fishing rod in an incredible fashion, and without any bait either. Unfortunately for the young boy, however, the fisherman's magical trick begins to start failing him. Due to his consistent tossing of his penis, the young boy begins to gain a fierce erection, and when he attempts to move his penis to either side, it ends up springing back to the middle. In dismay, the boy sprints up to the old fisherman and exclaims his issue. "What do I do now, sir? No longer can I keep up your tactic. Now when I try to grip my penis over to my left and right hand side, it only bounces to the center." The old fisherman looks at the young boy blankly for a second, before opening his mouth to speak. "Very well, young man. But forgive me, if you can gain an erection, then tell me, boy, what are you doing fishing?" Credit, my dad, and his dad before him who lives in Romania. I thought it was pretty funny. In honor of Norm Macdonald, here is my favorite joke of his. There was a fella, a little boy named Dirty Johnny. He'd always be the hellion in class and his teacher didn't think much of him. So the teacher had an in-class project, and she says, "Now this is what you're gonna do here, class. I want you to stand up, and tell the class a story from your life, and then afterwards say the moral to that story." A little girl raises her hand. "Yes, Becky, what's your story?" "My dad works for the hatchery here in town, and what happened was he got about 15 eggs, and he put them all in one basket. And he put it on the horse and buggy and drove back home, and by God," Becky says, "the bouncing, and all the eggs broke." "Well, that's a good story," the teacher says, "but what would the moral be to that?" Becky says, "Well, the moral is, don't put all your eggs into one basket." "Well, goddamn," the teacher says, "that's a good one." Anybody else? Marjorie puts up her hand. "Marjorie, what's your story?" She says, "Well, my dad works for the hatchery, as most all of us. Thank God for the hatchery," she says, "or we'd all be lost. But anyways, my dad knows that eggs become chickens. And so he was counting his chickens, and he added in the eggs, you see. And then he put them on a horse and buggy to go to town, and they all broke." "Well, what's the lesson to that?" the teacher says. She says, "Well, don't count your chickens before they hatch out of an egg." So the teacher says, "That's a great one too." Anybody else? Well, wouldn't you know it, Dirty Johnny has his hand up. So the teacher's like, "Holy God, I don't want it, but on the other hand, I made an oath to every child should I suppose I gotta." "Alright, Dirty Johnny, what do you have to say?" Johnny stands up. "This story's about my Uncle Terry. He never worked at the hatchery, on account of he was in Vietnam, and he got disability. He don't even like people that work at the hatchery. But this story happened far from these shores, in a little town called Da Nang. Terry was not well liked. His whole troop left him, abandoned, and he woke up in the weeds, and all they left him with was 3 bottles of Jack Daniels and some weapons. Terry stood up, downed one bottle right away, and said, "If I'm going out, I'm going out." He took his Kalashnikov, a couple of Glocks and his 2 bottles, and away he went. He found a town, and he didn't know if it was Charlie or if it was one he was sent to protect, but all he knew was he had hate in his gut. So he started firing, and he fired that Kalashnikov with an arching kind of like a farmer would with hay, with a scythe. And sure enough, the men fell like hay before him, and then the women, and by God I'm ashamed to say it, but then the children. And finally all that was left was Uncle Terry, standing in the mud and the blood in the glory. And he touched his pants, and it was wet, and he was ashamed. He felt shame, Uncle Terry, for he'd pissed himself. Well, he touched it again. It was not urine at all, but ejaculate. And Uncle Terry felt pride where shame once was. The teacher's like, good Christ. What kind of story is that? What the hell is the moral to that? He says, when Uncle Terry's been drinking you don't fuck with him. My wife and I were sitting at a table at her high school reunion, and she kept staring at a drunken man swigging his drink as he sat alone at a nearby table. I asked her, do you know him? Yes, she sighed. He's my old boyfriend. I understand he took to drinking right after we split up those many years ago, and I hear he hasn't been sober since. My God, I said, who would think a person could go on celebrating that long? Please smash the like button, and subscribe to my channel.